Welcome back, everyone. Well, let's face it, we all live in a pretty fast-paced life. Go for a drive, you're driving 60 miles an hour, you're whizzing by the countryside. Well, suppose you took a little more time to appreciate the architecture. Let's face it, we live in a part of the country that has an unbelievably rich history. So we got wind of something going on over in Washington County that we wanted to let you know about. So joining me today is Pat Niles. Welcome, Pat.
Welcome, Jesse. Or thank you, Jesse. Excuse me. Welcome. I'm usually doing that on the other end when I'm giving a tour
tours?
or something. Yeah.
You can take over here if you want.
No, that's all right.
I guess you got the idea. Pat is tour director, I guess we could say, but certainly the coordinator for a wonderful tour that's going to happen on May 30th in Washington County. And this is a tour of 4 historic homes. Obviously, these are homes at the turn of the century, the 1800s. And the idea is that, of course, they have a very rich and very diversified history, right? Let me just, I got to ask you just one question up front. Your love of history and your love of architecture, what's that about?
Well, I taught history for 30 years in Salem, which is in Washington County, and I was in Greenwich for a couple years before that. My love of history probably came from my family. My family goes back a long ways, and my uncle in particular did a lot of oral history, and I really got interested in military history in particular because of him, and that came from his father. My mother is also very active in historical organizations, so that's where it came from.
Yeah, generational for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
This tour, there are 4 different homes on this tour. I'll give you the names: the Wilson House, the Martin Fitch House, the McNish House, and the Blanchard Williams House. All very different examples from that period of the kind of architecture with the kind of story attached to it that makes this tour pretty special.
Absolutely.
You know what? Let's run through them a bit. The Wilson House.
Wilson House is a nice example of a farmhouse, center fireplace,
Salt box.
Salt box,
Yeah,
absolutely.
right.
And the owner of that house, when he built that, owned some mills as well. To build that type of house, and when you look at this, they're just coming off of the log cabins in the 18th century in that area, because that area only got opened up in the 1760s.
Yeah.
So this is the second generation of homes that are being built, that are being, they can mill the wood and that type of thing. So the Wilson House is we start our tour with the Wilson House, and we do that because it's just an average, maybe above average, middle-class person's home at that particular period of time.
And that particular period of time, I think, is the operative phrase.
Absolutely.
In that sentence. The Martin Fitch House.
The Martin Fitch House is interesting because if you know Washington County at all, the gentleman, I'm going to get away from the architecture for a minute.
Sure.
And talk about Asa Fitch. Asa Fitch is a well-known historian. He was an entomologist at that time. He had a laboratory on the grounds. But you and I might spend our time watching TV or something along those lines. He spent his time taking oral interviews and has become a very rich source for the area. He was doing these interviews in the 19th century, 1850s, actually interviewed Revolutionary War soldiers and people that had lived through that. So the house is special for that reason. Architecturally, it's great, but Asa Fitch, and being able to go through Asa Fitch's house, we're going to give you a little history on him as well.
Oh, that's really nice. I want to let you know that you're not just driving by these homes, you're actually stopping. And I want to give a shout out to the person who's doing this, Bill Krattinger.
Bill is a fantastic person. We got to know each other on the Board of Trustees. We're both on the Board of Trustees for the Washington County Historical Society. Bill was the president at that time, and Bill is such a resource. He does a number of talks around the area. He goes around the state and does evaluations on property. Very well known in our area. What I found was I didn't really understand it. And we went out a couple weeks ago, and he went through and he just analyzed, we went through these 4 houses and looked at the different aspects of architecture. He is a major resource. I mean, he's good enough that they're going to allow him to teach a course at SUNY Albany on architecture next year in the graduate program.
Wow. And again, this is the person that you're taking the tour with, who will be talking about these homes, talking about the families that lived in these homes, their contributions to the county, but also all of the kind of unique features of these homes. You know, if I'm not wrong, I don't pretend to be an architect for sure, but the Georgian influence was very strong around that time. If you look at anything in Washington, D.C., you know.
Right.
And so that's kind of pervasive in some of this architecture, right?
Yeah, we were talking before, and this I've learned from Bill. They didn't really have architects at that time.
That is a good thing.
They had the architectural books that they would put out, and they'd have master carpenters. One of the reasons why Bill picked these 4 houses, that some of these had an overlap. They had the same master carpenter building some of these homes. What they would do is to buy the book,
design book,
buy the book. You know, we go
Right.
to YouTube today to build them. At that time, they got these design books, and they would actually build the house from that.
based on the principles
Absolutely.
in these design books. So, you know, no architects, master craftsmen, of course, and design books. They usually came over from Europe, I would imagine, right?
Yes, and I think they were that's where the idea came from. I think
Yeah.
they were just starting to get some American books that were there at that time.
And you know what? I want to just mention one other, the Blanchard Williams home. Interesting statistic about this. When it was built very early on in the 1800s, it was considered to be the most expensive home in New York State for a grand sum of $5,000. Now, I can't do the math now, but I assume that's in the millions of
I
dollars
would say the
now.
millions of dollars, absolutely.
And that's a particularly interesting stop, and the last stop on the tour, right?
That's the last stop on the tour. It's an interesting house because when Bill took us through it a couple weeks ago, master carpenters in some cases would do design or craftsmanship right on the property, but some actually would, from the mills, actually have joined those pieces together. It's almost like a prefab. That particular house is an example of both. Master carpenter did some work on site, but he also had some prefabrication done beforehand. Got to pull in, and it was just a fantastic place.
Oh, Pat, you know, thank you so much for coming in.
Well, thanks for having me.
And,
I appreciate it.
Don't forget, Saturday, May 30th, over there in Salem. Easy jump from our region, and learn something about our past. Thanks. See this interview again. You can head to our website, looktvonline.com.